So, so guys, we are live now.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Arushi Rai, and I wholeheartedly welcome you to the Vigilance Debate Competition organized by NMIMS University Student Council in collaboration with MPSTME's Research Cell. The first two participants that are scheduled to compete are Atharva Phadke and Harsh Anand. The question to be debated is: should our government involve any third parties in the management and regulation of the citizens' data? We'll now begin with the opening remarks to be limited to 3 minutes each. A buzzer will be sounded at 2 minutes 30 seconds and then again at 3 minutes. The participant speaking for the contention may please begin now.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Atharva, and I'll be speaking for the topic. You see, government works on trust, democracy works on trust, and I have full faith in my government. I have always seen government as a friend who is awfully quiet at sometimes, but is mostly very responsive when it comes to answering few of the questions. I was recently reading this particular book, and it talks about something called as circle of safety. I feel government has done a very good job when it comes to including the last participant who is sharing his or her own data with the government in the form of financial statements, in the form of his or her own Aadhaar card and PAN card details, etc. Government has done a very good job making sure that everyone is included in the circle of safety and everyone feels safe. Government is our representative and sees what is good for us. If it feels sharing the data with third party will give birth to new and actionable insights, I feel it should go ahead and do so. Obviously, there is a necessity of government asking for consent, and I'm sure people who are willing to give consent to the government would do that, and government would be basically having a green flag to share the details with the third party. More detailed analysis done by third parties can be very beneficial for government to use. These analysis can be used by government in various ways, and the most successful way would be to use them to provide things to the lower stratas of our society. With a body as strong as Indian government, they can impose strong rules and regulations which will make sure third party don't step outside the line when it comes to breaching the privacy. Management and regulation of personal data by the third party can be a job which will reduce the pressure on the government. It will save a lot of time for the government and its official, and that time can be invested in coming up with new and nicer benefits for all the organizations and the stakeholders involved in the process. Government will be very efficient when it comes to making sure that the data which is being shared by the third party is utilized effectively and it does not leave our national boundaries. I am sure that government will utilize the power which we have put them into to a good use without breaching the trust of the society. I've always believed that government, when it comes to showcasing all the notions about what the contract is, will play fair. To close with my statement, I've seen government as a parent figure and I've seen government as a friend. I can ask whatever questions I want and I can erase my data whenever I want. I love this freedom and I won't let anything come between this when it comes to making sure that the government utilizes the data we have shared with the government. Thank you.
Thank you. The participant speaking against the contention may start now.
Good evening to everyone. I'll be advancing the view that the government should not be allowed to involve third parties in the management and regulation of citizens' data. I believe that they should not be allowed to do so because once the government is permitted to involve any third parties or share demographic and personal data of citizens with any third parties, then at least in theory there's a chance of further leakage of data or unauthorized sharing of data by the actual personnel who are involved in this activity. And this goes against the concept of informational privacy that has been highlighted by the Supreme Court in the right to privacy judgment, which is the Puttaswamy versus Union of India judgment, where they say that informational privacy, like bodily privacy and certain other aspects of privacy, form separate aspects of the right to privacy, which they have held to be enshrined within the larger right to life under the constitution of the country. So that completely goes against this whole concept of informational privacy, because one way you're talking about informational privacy, the next way you're talking about that not only should the state be able to collect data, it should be able to involve third parties in the regulation and management of data. The other thing is that it's the need of the hour in our country to enact a comprehensive data protection regulation, not a privacy legislation, which in any case should be there, but a separate legislation on data protection, which safeguards citizens' data that is collected by the government. And we have data that's collected in all forms. Obviously, what they do through Aadhaar is quite popular, but then they have data in other forms, which is the National Family Health Survey. Then they have data collection by bodies like NSSO. They collect data to get hold of the employment aspect of the country, growth of GDP, all sorts of data. Some might be personal, some might be demographic, but ultimately it's all coming from citizens of the country. So there should be a data protection legislation to safeguard that data. And unless and until a legal framework is put in place, they should not be allowed to share it with any third parties which they feel is which they feel is fine, or for purposes which the government thinks is fine, because there's no legal framework, there's no parameter to decide under what circumstances will the data be shared, for what purposes will it be shared, who will be qualified to get hold of that data. And resulting from this legal lacuna that we have, there is also no clarity on the legal liability that will be there in case there is any misuse of data, or in case of any downright illegal use or intimidation of data. To give a very small example, if one uses the electronic mechanism of applying through driving license, you have to also upload your photograph. And who's to know if they share, if this data sharing is allowed, then then we are open to all sorts of misuse, which will only be the product of a devilish mind who's able to use this data in the absence of any appropriate legal framework to assert legal liability, and in the absence of technical safeguards to ensure that this data does not go into hands for which it is not meant. So unless and until these gaps can be filled, I strongly oppose the view that any form of third party involvement should be allowed. And we have ample precedent of data leakage happening on Aadhaar all the time. So with this, I'll be concluding my support, my opposition for the view that the citizen should be that a third party should be allowed to be involved in management of citizens' data. Thank you.
Thank you. Both of you now have 2 minutes to prepare your rebuttal questions. You may please begin now.
I'll be proceeding first.
Yeah, you have time to prepare the questions, 2 minutes for that, and then we'll begin with your rebuttal round. All right? A minute to go. All right, your 2 minutes are up. The participants speaking against the motion may please ask their questions first. The questions and subsequent answers should take place for 5 minutes now. Please ensure that your questions are clear and to the point.
Can I ask all my questions in one go, or do I have to wait for his response question wise?
Questions and answers. All right.
Understood. Understood. Thank you. Clear. That's clear. My
Okay, you'll
first
be.
question is
Well, just a second. You'll be reminded at 2.5 minutes that half your time is done. All right. You may begin now. Thank you.
so my first question is what is his view on elimination of data, that he can erase data whenever he likes, because what we know from past precedents on Aadhaar is that you can only edit your data on those platforms and not eliminate or delete that data, because ultimately the platform is controlled by the government, in Aadhaar's case the UIDI. So I would like clarity on that aspect.
When we talk about Aadhaar and PAN for that matter, what we are looking essentially at uh, is a number or is a security number which will be supported by that person throughout his life. So when we talk about deleting data from the databases of Aadhaar or PAN, it is not really possible for the government to implement that, because you can't actually edit and change your own Aadhaar number, and that is really harmful for person who has something similar to that. So I feel it is a very great move by the government by not allowing the people to change the entire thing, while keeping it easy for the people to change few of the details. So I feel when we talk about erasing the data, government should keep few options wherein the people can surely edit their data, but fully deleting the data when it comes to government databases should not be allowed.
All right. And my next question is, what's your view on the efficiency of the government in terms of how they'll share this data with third parties when we don't have any legal framework, to dictate this process?
Yeah, so when I was giving my inputs regarding the topic, I mentioned something like a government can have strong set of rules and regulations and can ensure a set of consent forms wherein people would agree to the sharing rights which they provide to the government and so on and so forth to the third party. I would like the government to use ways in which they can give initial notice to the people about how and when they are going to collect the data and how is the data going to be used. Now, I definitely feel that when it comes to applying for newer data like driving license and or PAN card or passport for that matter, people won't have an option of not agreeing to what government says. But when it comes to sharing data related to their health or sharing data related to their driving patterns, I think if the government makes sure that they have a set rules or set flow plan wherein they'll initially intimate the candidates in question, I'm sure people would agree to it. Hello? Hello?
You're audible to us. Harsh, do you have any more questions for him?
I have no further questions from him. So if he wants to
Okay.
proceed.
Yeah, I would like to go next. I was a bit confused with your statement when you said unless and until in your initial argument. So what I essentially got from it is you are agreeing that the sharing data with third party can be possible unless and until government makes sure that the pond is sealed from all the sides, so there is no data leakage. Would I be right in assuming that?
I'm sorry, would you be right in assuming what? If you can just
You used the terms unless and until in your initial statement. So what I gathered from that is you are okay if the government shares the data with the third party unless and until they have a set of rules and regulations. So you are not exactly against the topic entirely. Would I be right in assuming that?
not exactly. actually I am opposed to data sharing with third parties in any form. Absolutely. But if at all they can come up and justify a very broad public purpose that will be served, that is so great that it outweighs all possible risks, all possible losses, dangers that come with hacking, unauthorized use of data, data leakage, any consequences that may arise from inaccurate storage of data, then I'll be open to it, subject to the rider that there should be some framework to dictate that whole process. There should be some framework to safeguard citizens' interests, to establish technical standards, and ensure at the last legal liability for any misuse of data. In those circumstances, I can agree, but even then, there should be some some public purpose that's so great that it outweighs all this, which I think is not possible. So all in all, you can assume that I'm absolutely opposed to it, because I don't think there'll be a public purpose advanced by the government which will be so humongous that will take care of all of these loose ends.
Right, again, Harsh, there I would like to point out that saying that a purpose is so huge is quite a subjective thing. So for you, a purpose might not be that huge. For a person who is absolutely lowest in the economic sphere of our society, he might agree to these terms. So I feel
Get to the question, Atharva. Please get to
yeah,
the
so I
question.
feel you're not really sure about the point. So moving on to the next question, what I would like to ask is, don't you think the power of asymmetry and the data asymmetry is like a spring which when pressed harder by not allowing the data sharing rights would bounce back and have harsh impacts on our society?
As of yet, I don't see any reason for which the government should be allowed to involve third parties into sharing of data. See, data works on a very basic concept. Any demographic, I'll be giving an example of any personal data relating to my date of birth, my my any other personal detail that belongs to me. I share it with the government either on a contract or on due to a legal burden, such as in the case of Aadhaar. So till that level, I understand the whole concept of data sharing. But what is the need for the government to be able to share it with third parties? What do I owe to those third parties? What do they owe to me? And why is this sharing needed or necessary in the first place? They have UIDI, they can do it. They have other bodies that do it. So what do I get from it? And in case of third parties, I'm also not under as yet under any legal burden or any contractual burden to share it with them. When I am under such a burden, I do it. Say, for example, on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on YouTube, they have algorithms that check my search preferences, for example. Based on that, they collect data and then they show me ads. There also, there's no legal burden, but at least there's a contractual burden. I agree to their terms of sharing data through the privacy policy. But under this general idea that the government should be permitted to involve third parties into data sharing, I am opposed to it, not only for reasons that I responded to in my previous answer, but because I don't see any rational, any positive reason for it to be permitted. Because why? Ultimately, that data is owned by me. So this concept of proprietary ownership of data is very crucial to me, which is basically the foundation of my opposition to it, the whole concept.
Yeah, again, I feel this is a very subjective issue, and I would like to believe that there is a point of tipping where you will agree that the sharing of data with third party is a valid point to do. Arushi, I feel I'm done from my side.
All right, thank you. We'll
Thank
now
you.
start with the closing remarks, and each participant shall have not more than 2 minutes for the same. A buzzer will be sounded at 1 minute 30 seconds first, followed by at 2 minutes. Be mindful of not introducing any new points during this time. The participant speaking for the contention may please begin.
For my closing remarks, I would like to say that after healthy discussion with Harsh about this particular issue, I am still solid on the opinion that sharing of data with third parties with adequate consent and adequate frameworks would be really helpful for our entire society. Considering that the third party and government have agreed upon a special issues or special terms and conditions, I'm sure using the insights which are generated by the third party would be really helpful for Indian society and its welfare.
I just want to close by summing up that involving third parties in the sharing and management of citizens' data is a bad idea because it's fraught with innumerable dangers. There's an absolute absence of any legal framework to give an outline of the whole process. We don't know what technical standards will the government come up with, if any, which those third parties will be held accountable to, so that they can continue to participate in the process. We don't know what public purpose will be served, if at all any will be served, if third parties are involved in this whole process, because we can take a cue from Aadhaar, where the whole idea of making Aadhaar compulsory to avail certain benefits actually backfired, in the sense that people who did not have Aadhaar and people who were not able to verify or authenticate their demographic details were left out of the whole process. And it was obviously highlighted in the case of ration that was given to the BPL segment, but the risks that flow from that are widespread across all areas. And there's no this the whole thing goes against the concept of privacy and data ownership, because we obviously share that data with state, which is a different kind of sharing in itself. But permitting third parties to come in and take away a segment of that data just beats the concept of informational privacy and autonomy. So those are my closing remarks.
All right, thank you so much, Atharva and Harsh. We'll move on to the next set of participants now. Monish Mohanty and Praveer Chaube will be debating the same question. Should our government involve any third parties in the management and regulation of the citizens' data? Monish Mohanty will speak for the contention and Praveer Chaube will speak against the contention. We'll begin with the opening remarks to be limited to 3 minutes each. A buzzer will be sounded at 2 minutes 30 seconds and then again at 3 minutes. We request both participants to please turn on their cameras. Thank you. The participant speaking for the contention may please begin now.
Hi everyone, this is Monish Mohanty from NMIMS. I am here to give substantial argument for the topic, which is should data privacy be allowed by the government, and I certainly think it should be allowed. And if I speak about it, the first thing that comes to my mind is a quote which says technology, which says that you have to be at your feet when you think about data privacy, and data is something which is a pollution problem of the information age, and protecting privacy is the environmental challenge that exists for us now. So I think we all must agree that the government has limited infrastructure, and what it can do more is to bring in some third party which can help the government in establishing some ground rules so that it doesn't face any issues going to the future. So managing a lot of data can be cumbersome. There are a lot of people in our country, to be precise, 150 crores or more or less. I am not sure, to be honest, but there are about 150 crores existing in our country, and to manage that amount of data is going to be a lot of cumbersome process, and it's going to be hectic for the government managing it. So a third party can also train the people. I mean, for a very long time, if the prospect is for the future and it's here to stay. So the people who are experienced, people who belong to the third party, can really help people train and understand the features of how the data privacy is to be maintained, how it can be done, and how the security issues can be resolved better when it arises. So privacy can also be handled better if it's done like that. Scalability. When I talk about scalability, the scalability issues also exist, and the data privacy teams of the third party involved in this sort of environment can help manage the resources more or less. I mean, how much they need, how much time they need, how much resources they need. They can manage it according to their needs or wishes. They can even focus on the government having given this responsibility to the third party. The third party can help itself manage the core competencies better, and that also allows the government, it gives the government a perfect cushion to put its head in on something that requires more attention, and it can fall on to the other things that are needed in the society. So things also get done fast if a third party is involved, and I believe these are the things that I will put forth in my arguments, so as to believe that the third party should be involved while making a particular decision. I would now ask Praveen to make his remarks.
The participant speaking against the contention may please begin.
Yeah, I am Pravir. I am MBA law student. I am in second year of MBA law. So I would be speaking against the contention that should a government involve any third party in the management and regulation of citizens' data. So it is a high risky thing because. Because the increased digital security risk are faced by the individual and organization before focusing on personal data breaches. More precisely, the breach of confidentiality of personal data as a result of malicious activity and in accidents. So, digital security risks are about more data openness, enhanced access, and sharing. Typical require opening information to systems and data can be accessed and shared. This may further expose part of organization or country to digital security threat that can lead to incidents that disrupt the availability, integrity, and confidentiality of data information system on which can harm economically and social activities. Consequently, assets and reputation and physical activities can also be affected by it. Increasing impact of personal data breaches where data can be accessed and shared. Personal data breaches are more likely to occur. This will not only cause harm because of the privacy violation of individual whose personal data is breached. I want to quote some examples too. In 2005, Choice Point, a consumer data aggregation company, was the target of a high-profile data breach involving 1.5 lakh personal records. They had to pay a USD 26 million in fees and fine. In the same way, Facebook was fined around 5 lakh Great Britain pounds, the maximum fine ever in the history of Information Commissioner Office for unfairly processing personal data. And I would also like to quote the violation of privacy and intellectual property right and other interests. The risk of enhanced access and sharing go beyond digital security and personal data breach. They include they include most notable risk of violating contractual and socially agreed terms of data reuse, violation of agreed terms and expectation of data use, even where individual and organization agree on and consent to specific terms of data resharing, includes the for which the data should be reused. Uh, that would be all from my side.
All right, thank you. Both of you now have 2 minutes to prepare your rebuttal questions. You may please begin. I have a minute to go. Okay, we'll start now. The participants speaking against the motion may please ask their questions first. The questions and the subsequent answering shall take place for 5 minutes now. Please
Uh,
ensure that your questions are clear and to the point. Do not beat around the bush. Get directly to the question. Okay? Please start.
so my rebuttal question would be that how we can get sure that the third party whom we are appointing for the data analysis or something like that is not do not breach our classified data. And a company as big as Facebook, like one of the biggest company in the world, has been founding breaching data, and they earn basically from the data. So it is simply we should not like trust anyone for the data.
Right. So you talked about Facebook, right? So Facebook, where the data is breached, we need to look at the peripheral side of it also. Why the data is breached, how the data is breached, and more importantly, what kind of data is breached. So if we address these three questions, I don't think Facebook would have a lot of answers to the basic question that have been asked here, that why the data was breached. The data was breached because there was an incumbency, there was some sort of a loophole in their operating procedures, and that's what I addressed in my opening remarks when I said that there is not enough technological evidence as far as the government is concerned. There is not enough infrastructure as far as the government is concerned, and shifting that responsibility to other third-party providers can help it reduce its own burden and can solve the issue more effectively.
Yeah. That's I'm good with my rebuttals. I don't want to ask anything.
So, can I go ahead with my questions, Arushi?
Yes, please go ahead.
So, Pravir, you talked about breach of confidentiality, right? So, can you talk about the types of data that can be protected? I mean, we talked about the types of data that needs to be secured. The government needs to secure a certain types of data. So, it's not that we are operating in our daily lives and the data is breached and it causes us any harm. So, how does the data breaching affect a common man? Can you please throw some light on that?
uh, Data breach can be like harmful in various aspects. So it can be taken like your Aadhaar only. Like if you give your Aadhaar information to company like TCS, like they are handling the whole Aadhaar thing. It can be breached if someone hacks it or they sells our data, then it can be breached easily. uh, can you ask your question again? Can you come again?
Okay, sure. I talked about the types of data that can be breached. We operate in our houses using our cell phones or using our devices as per our convenience. So if we are using a certain kind of device or we are using a certain kind of application, how are we so unsure about the type of applications that we are using from so many years, and we have a fear of those applications revealing our data to someone else? I mean, how will that affect us in our daily lives?
There are many uh, there are many terms and conditions, and in that terms and conditions there are many threats to your data. When you read those terms and conditions, you might find some of them are using. And as you must be knowing that Huawei phones are banned in some of the countries because mm, they have the policy that whenever the Chinese government want their data, they can take it without any questions asked.
Okay. So we are not really clear till now about the type of data that can be misused if it's been leaked to some other some other application that we have been using. So I must raise my case here if I may say that for the common man that operates any mobile device or any application in particular, no particular harm can be done to that man unless it's a big corporate organization where data can be leaked and a certain kind of harm can be done. I'll allow you to complete.
uh, you were not audible. Hello.
Yeah. Am I audible
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. You are audible now. Can you repeat it again?
No, I think I got your point very clearly. And when you said about the information leakage or the breach of the data that happens, it happens in big corporate organizations where they have competitors and they are suspicious about the data being leaked can eventually turn out
Each and every
against them.
type of
Right,
each and every type of data can be leaked. if
right,
if if you're if you're like a small account number is also getting leaked. India is such
right,
a big population that if even a person who knows a hacking or malware functions, he can just take 1 rupee from your account, and he can do it for 200 days, and uh, he can become a millionaire in just certain days,
right,
and it cannot be cached easily. That's
right.
why it is very easy. That's why people are like more inclined towards it.
Right. So that's where hitting the iron rod with the iron rod brings into play, where we bring in expert solutions to our infrastructure, bringing in third-party expert.
Monish, stick to your questions, please. Please ask
Yes,
questions.
yes, sorry. So, I mean, that's what I wanted to say, so that's why I said, if the government has
So
limited infrastructure,
we should ask some highly qualified people to train our government official. We should hire some people as government official, but not we should not appoint a company, as it is still a threat.
okay, but that is when the things you are looking for are long term, not short term. So if you want a solution for short term, that's going to come into play, and you are going to trust someone or other if you want a clear solution for the limited period of time that you have in your hand. You
You
cannot trust someone,
outsource people for a short term thing,
right? They need to be
but you keep them with you for a long term thing.
right. But they should have some credibility in the market. You cannot just close your eyes and blindly trust anyone that you see next on the street. You have to trust someone who has credibility from his experience, from his market experience that he has got.
On some aspects I agree with you, and on some aspects I do not agree with you.
Right. Okay.
We'll start with the closing remarks now, and each participant shall have not more than 2 minutes for the same. A buzzer will be sounded at 1 minute 30 seconds first, followed by at 2 minutes. Be mindful of not introducing any new points during this time. The participant speaking for the contention may please start.
So when I come to my closing remarks, I really have to target the points that I mentioned, where I said the government really has to trust someone outside its sources so that the data cannot be breached. And I emphasize it more clearly when I say it cannot be breached, and it should not be breached, as it belongs to each and every citizen of the country, and where the government has a lot of hectic tasks in its hand, and it has to manage a lot of things. It has a lot of things going on in its mind. So a third party can actually facilitate the process when it manages a lot of data, which can prove to be cumbersome at some point of time, and the handling of the data and scaling of the data becomes really easy, where you bring experts into the game and help the process get smoother. Thanks a lot.
The participant speaking against the contention may also begin now.
I would like to say that there is a lot of security risk when you give your data to manage to a third party. So there is a high risk of confidentiality. So there are many things such as fingerprints, iris scan, and many types of things which is very vulnerable, and consequently organizational assets, reputation, and physical activities can also be affected. um, and An organized crime, it can take place to an organized crime. It can be a political attack, or mm, that would be all. Hello.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a minute now to total your scores, and we'll let you know which participants move to the next round. We'll let you know that we'll announce that in a minute now. After that, we'll break for about 10 minutes, post which we'll be debate the participants that have qualified to the next round will be debating the question: should our banks allow for evolving policies that will cover the newer definition of frauds as technology advances and criminals are getting smarter. All right, give us a minute. We'll be back with your scores. Manish Mohanty and Harsh Anand. The question being debated is, should our banks allow for evolving policies that will cover the newer definitions of fraud as technology advances and criminals are getting smarter? Harsh Anand will be speaking for the contention. Monish Mohanty will be speaking against the contention. We'll now begin with the opening remarks, to be limited to 3 minutes each, as was in the previous rounds. A buzzer will be sounded at 2 minutes 30 seconds and then again at 3 minutes. The participant speaking for the contention may please begin now.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be advancing the view that banks should be allowed to develop policies that take into account newer methods of fraud that are assisted by the evolution in technology, and that equips anybody who's trying to make a quick buck by defrauding the banking system. So I support the view that banks should be allowed to accordingly develop their policies in view of the fact that doing so will permit banks to develop the technological apparatus that is needed to detect these transactions and potentially prevent them before these transactions are automatically executed. What I'm trying to say here is that while at its legal core, the concept of fraud remains the same as it has over the past many years, whether in statute or as interpreted by judges. But the technological apparatus that might be employed by anybody who's trying to get ahead of the banking system may have changed, and it has changed with evolution of technology in terms of internet and through various other ways. So I think we should not be stuck in time with the fact that no, banks do their adequate homework, they go through the paperwork, they meet the regulatory requirements, and that should be it, because actually that's not it. So they should be allowed to develop their policies that has an interface in terms of technology which assists them in detecting these transactions before these transactions are actually are eventually executed. Not having such a policy will, as it has been seen in the past through some of the famous scams, the banking scam that was done by Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi, that's obviously one that comes to mind as being the very famous ones. But even others that one may not have potentially learned from in the media. Those transactions might go under the radar despite the current safety mechanism, which is limited to paperwork. And from the topic itself suggests that there can be situations where not only the evil mind of the fraudster but the technology that is at his or her assistance also plays a substantial role. The advantage that banks will draw from this is that having such a policy will not only enhance the service value that they render to their customers, they'll also be able to establish banking practices that that prevent these transactions from happening before at all, or at least while they are in the midst of being executed and the benefit has not completely been drawn by the fraudster or group of fraudsters. And potentially, say 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, when the technology that is employed in the entire banking system as a whole is far more advanced than it is today, and in in coming few years we allow the RBI, the government comes to know that banks should independently be allowed to develop those policies. Maybe 6 years down the line, when somebody tries to make a quick buck from the banking system, we'll be able to prevent such a potential hazard. And the wider technological net that banks will need to establish in terms of maybe recruiting more staff will is also one of the factors amongst many others that individual bank will be able to judge and ultimately take a decision on that basis if we allow them this liberty. Thank you.
Please be mindful of the time. The participant speaking against the contention may please begin now.
Good evening, everyone. This is Monish Mandi from NMMS. I'll be speaking against the motion where the motion says that frauds in the banks should the policies in the bank should be renewed, and it should support to counter the frauds in the banks. So when I'll start with a quote from Steve Jobs, who said that technology is nothing. What is important is that you have faith in people, that they are basically good and smart, And if they are good and smart, you give them the right tool, they can do wonders for you. So when I heard Harsh speaking, so the first thing that came to my mind are people being technologically smart. So we know a lot of people in our country use smartphones, but that doesn't make people smart. People for making people smart, we need the people to get into the right frame of mind to access technology and to know what technology clearly is. So people are not in that frame of mind, and to bombard them with policies and all the implementations and regulations will really confuse the hell out of them. And when I speak about the other point, I really stand against the motion because there will be a certain interference from the higher authorities. Higher authorities in this case might be RBI or any other higher authorities concerned with the banks. So there can be frequent changes in policies which will incur a lot of costs in research, in writing, and in legal considerations. So ensuring compliance with the state and the government policies will also be a hectic task. Adapting to these new technologies to counter evolving frauds can be also a lot of a cumbersome task for the banks. Banks often have been told banks have the initial defense, but they do not have the particular set of tools that they can counter. So when we talk about advanced analytics and we talk that advanced analytics can solve the problem of fraud, to counter fraud in an immediate manner, it cannot be done in an immediate manner. It has to be a transformation process, and we all know that Rome wasn't built in a day, and it has to take years and years to be able to achieve that. Analytics can sometimes be deployed, and it can be deployed effectively, but what it can do also is that it can dig out many false positives where it is created by bad policies and inefficient processes. So I'll rest my case on that, and I'll allow Harsh to make his counter arguments.
Okay, thank you. Both of you now have 2 minutes to prepare your rebuttal questions. You may please begin.
All right. If I have my questions, can I begin, or should I wait
No, no.
for
Let's
Manish?
please
I,
wait for 2 minutes.
Arushi,
Okay.
I have got the
Okay.
questions too.
Okay, the both of you are ready.
Yes.
Okay. We'll now begin the rebuttal round. The participants speaking against the motion may please ask their questions first. The questions and subsequent answering shall take place for 5 minutes. Please ensure that your questions are clear and to the point. Do not beat around the bush and be mindful of the language you're using. No swearing on screen, please. Please start.
So
So my first question.
I think I'll be the one to ask the question.
Yeah, Monish gets to ask first. He's against the
Sorry,
motion, so
sorry.
he gets to ask first.
So my first question to Harsh will be, he talked about technological apparatus, right? So do you think it's going to be feasible for the banks to implement that sort of technological apparatus when you are talking about not internets, not phones, not any sort of you know the connectivity that has been in motion for the last 10 or 15 years. We are talking about deep analytics here. We are talking about advanced analytics here, where we are talking if the fraud can be detected from future. So we are trying to curb that. So do you think that will be implemented at its first place when you're talking about technological apparatus that the banks need to use? Do you think it's feasible enough?
I think it will be feasible, at least in terms of the commercial banking sector, which is comprised of only just maybe 4 or 5 private sector banks and a bunch of large public sector banks. It will definitely be feasible for them. Might not be feasible from a cost point of view for cooperative banks, but definitely for scheduled commercial banks. as far as the technological apparatus that they'll need to acquire, I don't expect banks to actually develop the technology or any in-house inception of that technology. They'll definitely have to meet that expenditure and outsource that technology, probably hire it from a software company or a company that's involved in the relevant technological sphere that can provide it as a service. They'll have to spend their time and energy on it, finding out the right product that meets the requirement, doing it doing it just in time so that they can catch up with the evolution in technology. But it will be feasible for them. It may be difficult, but it's not impossible. It will be quite feasible from them from a technological and cost point of view.
Right. When you're talking
If
about feasibility, I don't think it will be feasible enough, and I have to strongly disagree with you when I say that if you are creating a machine learning algorithm for, let's say, detecting a fraud that has to happen, let's say 2 months from now, then we need someone to code that machine learning algorithm for me. And if I code that machine learning algorithm for me, I need to be educated enough to know how the codes run, how the codes work, and how the machine learning algorithm can help me prevent that particular fraud and help me detect that particular fraud and help me evade it. To learn that we need people who are more technologically inclined. We need people who are more advanced in their studies and people who can really relate to what's been happening in the field of analytics, so that this kind of technology can be implemented in the future. So moving on to my next question, when I say that when you talked about transactions detections, when you talked about Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi, so do you think
I'm
a
sorry
lack
to
of
interject. There is some issue with your voice. Sorry to interject.
is it from my side or is it from your side? I think
No, no,
more.
it's from Harsh's end. Monish is clear to me. Harsh, it's your internet.
As of yet, just while he was there, he was clear to me as well. Please continue.
Yeah, so I'll be moving on to my next question where you talked about the transactions detection, where you talked about Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi. Do you think that Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi made use of to be the devil's advocate, they made use of the technology aspect of it. They thought that they can get away with it because India was not so technologically smart, or the banks related to it were not technologically smart, or do you think it was because of the loopholes or the flaws in the banks itself that made them do so? What do you think about it?
My view is that what they were able to do did not have so much to do with any gaps in technology, but it had to do with the loopholes or gaps in terms of scrutinizing their transaction. The transaction essentially consisted of them issuing fake letters of intent through a subsidiary in Hong Kong or something. I don't recollect the factual aspects very well, but the core of the whole fraud was that they had issued fake letters of intent that Punjab National Bank was never aware of up until the whole time that their chairman broke the news that this whole fraud has been carried out for the past so many years. I don't think it had to do, in all fairness, with respect to them, with any inferiority in terms of the technology that was adopted by the bank, or that they had any technological edge. It was just that they were able to stay beneath the radar while all the while they were issuing fake letters of intent. Obviously, some people at PNB knew about it, but they were also hand in gloves with them due to their own financial interest. So I think it was due to a combination of these factors and not due to any superior technological edge that they had vis-a-vis the bank's end.
Okay. So there you go, right? You are agreeing that there was no technological loopholes that led to the flying away of Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi, but you really are sure about the loopholes that are present in the banks right now, and that needs a policy change, not the policy change on the current technological advancements that the bank have made.
Question, please. Your
So,
question.
right. So I'm done with it.
Okay, you're done with your questions?
Yes.
All right.
Can I begin asking my questions?
Yes, Harsh, you may begin.
So my first question is, what is the basis of this analogy that people using smartphones and then they can be trusted, versus the whole aspect of equating it with people using technology to carry out any fraudulent banking activities? Please clarify.
Okay. So you are using Swiggy, right? Or you are using Zomato or any sort of online delivery systems that come to your house. So if you are not aware of how to operate that system, I think most of them are not aware of it. So if you don't make them technologically inclined to that sort of delivery systems and that sort of cost management systems. We don't think that our aim of making people more technologically inclined can serve the purpose of making the banks more technologically inclined. So if we start the service right from our homes, then we can bring in more people in this together, and there won't be a long time till the government and the higher authorities agree to the fact that there needs a lot of technological advancement needs to be done, and the policy needs to be changed in that direction also. But we are not in that frame of mind right now. That's what I said.
All right. My next question is, what is this intellectual? What is the main intellectual argument behind you saying that if we allow banks to develop these policies, then it will result into bombarding of policies and new sets of regulations coming in? I could not actually catch the intellectual argument behind it. So if you can please clarify your view on that.
Yes, that was from a view when I talked about the technological advancements being done and people being made to know about it, people being made to realize about it. So people should know about it first, right? If anything new comes to a house, then you should know about it before first utilizing it. You first know about the product, that then you go about using it. So if people aren't aware of it, then how do you expect people to know about the changes that needs to be made and the policy changes that needs to be done in the future that will eventually affect the people in the longer run? So you can't be expecting them to know about certain processes before knowing the process itself. That's what I meant when I said that bombarding policies won't help until and unless you go door to door and educate people about the processes that you are meant to operate.
All right. My last question is, you made a remark on potential interference by parties if the proposition's view is carried out. So could you clarify your stand on this? What will be the interference or the interference that you suspect, that being the specific?
You're harsh or not clear?
Yeah, your voice broke off in the middle. Could you please repeat the question for him?
uh, about your remark on the interference that may be carried out by the higher authorities in banks if the proposition's view is carried forward. Could you clarify on any potential interference that you suspect?
Right. So that was in relation to the use of advanced analytics when I said about that, because there is not a lot of people who know about advanced analytics, and government officials are no odd man. So they will be really need to be aware about those form of technologies in order to implement that in the first place. When I talked about interference from higher authorities as well as from government and state authorities, I meant that when I said that uh, for them to implement it at the first place, they need to know about it, they need to know about how that functions and how the results are to be certain that it will work in the future. That's what I mean.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Now, the both of you have been allotted a minute to prepare your closing remarks before you deliver them. Is that clear?
Right.
You will have a minute to
That's
prepare
clear.
them and then 2 minutes to deliver it. Your minute starts now. All right, the minute's up. We'll start with the closing remarks now, and each participant shall have not more than 2 minutes for the same. The buzzer will be sounded at 1 minute 30 seconds first, followed by at 2 minutes. Be mindful of not introducing any new points during this time. The participant speaking for the contention may please begin.
I just want to sum up the proposition's view on the topic by summing up that banks should be allowed to develop new policies with respect to the technological aspects of potentially fraudulent activities, because evolution of technology will ultimately benefit the banks and the banking system, not just banks, the entire banking system that consists of banks, customers that have a direct interface with banks, but businesses large and small that function on the basis of loans advanced by banks, and even the government as a whole, which has an interest in the overall sound functioning of the banking system. It will enable the banking system to function smoothly and not be taken undue advantage of by people who try to cause any prejudice to the banking system for the sake of their own personal alleged pecuniary benefit. And not having room for evolution of the policy in that space will just keep us at a static in terms of our regulatory mechanisms, our checks that are there will not be able to keep pace with the growth in this process. We are looking at the danger of falling behind in that aspect. So that's my closing remark in support of the proposition's view. Thank you.
Thank you, Harsh. The participant speaking against the contention may please start.
Thank you. So when I move on to my closing remarks, when I say that there should not be any policy changes in the uh, frauds and the technology advancement in the banks, I just need to say, I won't say a lot, but I would say that a simple, focused, and easily understood policy is the most cost-effective way of demonstrating a committed advancement towards combating fraud. When I say that, I mean that there is the immediate aftermath of the discovery of a fraud can be a hard time, and dealing with it with the policy change in your policy change with the technological advancements that have already been made can truly be cumbersome, and the interference from the higher authorities during the installation of that process can also be cumbersome. And when the frequent changes have also been made in the policies, the research writing and the legal compliance team can also prove to be quite hectic in that process, and looking forward to those things can be truly effective, can be truly cumbersome. So I would suggest that the thing that we should be focused with is a simple and easily understood policy will be helping a lot of people, also from the banks and the customers. So I address my question.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the competition. Excellent performance by all four of you today. Thank you so much for spending your Monday evening with us. The results will be announced on our Instagram pages in a couple of days and will be also intimidated to you personally. Any questions?
No questions from my side also.
I also don't have any questions, but I would just take a minute to appreciate anyone who came up with the topic. Especially the second topic was quite interesting. It had a lot of room to develop arguments on either side.
Thank you so much. We'll pass that on to the concerned person. And both of your arguments for and against the contention were very well placed and formulated. It was really exhilarating to look at you to put forth your points and opinions and contradict each other. It was really exhilarating.
Thank you, Arushi.
Arushi, if I may just ask,